Sup? Welcome to the unofficial Tedeschi Trucks podcast. This is episode number 97, and I am Adam Choit. To follow this show, it's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram and on YouTube. You're probably there already if you're watching. Just search Tedeschi Trucks Podcast. Excuse me. I'm at Adam Choit on Instagram and Twitter if you want to follow me. And please be sure to give the show a positive review on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. That is greatly appreciated. As well, I have another show, another podcast called People We Love. And what I do with that one is interview people from all walks of life, most often comedians, entertainment types, creative types about their lives and careers. But I also ask them to highlight the people they love, who have inspired them, influenced them, helped them in their career, their personal life, their journey. That's been a lot of fun. Please check that out at People We Love Podcast on Instagram or peoplewelovepodcast.com. I also have a short film out that I wrote and directed. It is on YouTube, embedded at the film's website. It is a dystopian psychological satire. I'm not going to go too much into that. I want to get started with today's episode momentarily. But please check that out as well at theeditedmovie.com. That's theeditedmovie.com. So for this live stream, we're going to be recapping the band's final. The band is Tedeschi Trucks Band. The band's final 4 shows at the Orpheum Theatre in Boston with superfan Matthew Gervais and Scott McLennan, who is a journalist who actually already wrote a review recap of the week of shows, the 4 shows. But let's get into it. I'm gonna add them into the stream here, and we'll start talking Boston. There they are. We're here.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, guys.
Oh, how you guys holding up?
I'm recovered.
Recovered.
Doesn't get any easier.
You talking about getting older or traveling or all of the above?
Getting older. This wasn't a bad travel for me. This is an easy travel for me.
Yeah.
Fun shows.
How far do you guys live exactly from the venue? Because I want to get into. I don't want to take up your entire evening because we can talk so much about TTB. I know the 3 of us endlessly. That's why for the first time, or not for the first time, but when we were talking before we started recording, I wasn't worrying about like spoilers or talking too much about TTB and not having enough to talk about on the podcast because you guys can talk about this band endlessly. But I kind of want to know, like, a little bit more even before the shows. Getting to the venue and what the area's like and the vibe before the shows. Because just to establish ourselves, who went to what shows? Because we do have all 4 covered between the 2 of you guys. You guys both went to the last 2, and then one of you went to the first one, and one of you went to the second one. So you can kind of.
Yeah, I was at the first night on the Tuesday the 29th.
And then the last 2.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
Matt.
Yep. Wednesday, and then Friday and Saturday.
So it was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
Interesting that it wasn't like one of those Friday, 2 weekend shows and then a week, because they've been scheduling a couple of residencies like that with it 2 weekends or weekends on the
I think Boston, they don't have to worry about being on a weekend. I think the people are going to show up. I mean, it could be Easter. People are going to show up. It's, you know what I mean? It's Tedeschi Trucks. It's Boston. The crowd's going to be there.
Susan Homecoming hometown show, and I see just from the write-ups from your article and from what some people's posts that it was a family affair, so to speak, for the band as expected in Boston. How far do you guys live from the Orpheum Theatre, or tell me what your travel was like getting in there?
I come about 40 minutes from the west, and it's probably the same for you, isn't it?
I was surprised. It was actually, so I'll go down to the common garage, which is right there. You pop out from underneath, and then you just walk across.
Yeah, that's where I go.
Walk. So for me, it's about a 35 minute drive. So pretty quick in and out.
I mean, the only headache this time was having the Royals and Joe Biden in town on the same night as the Friday show, and I think wasn't there who was playing, the Bruins or the Celtics? So it was
a lot happening.
It was
Celtics
a cluster
on Friday, and the Bruins were yesterday.
Yeah,
and
the Friday night drive was a bit of a horror show, and but the big thing you try to avoid with the Orpheum shows is every year there's a big tree lighting ceremony on the Boston Common, and when that coincides with the TTB shows, that gets to be a bit of a disaster too. But that was I think the band strategically planned the night off to be the same night as the tree lighting. I like to give them credit for that. So
I hadn't thought about that, but that's probably spot on. It was actually kind of not the best weather-wise this week and this weekend too. It's pretty rainy, dreary, raw, but it was great otherwise.
But the week too, it was a crazy week. I mean, the reason I didn't go to the Wednesday show is, there was a Hot Tuna show that I ended up going to at the Cabot Theater where TTB did that Fireside show earlier in the year. And then, and I totally forgot about this, but it was one of those Allman Family reunion shows. I think, was it Saturday? So like there was all this music and kind of very interrelated music happening all week this week around the TTB show. So,
well, when you get those like the Live Nations and stuff the emails pushed to you, and then I saw the Devin Allman show or whatever it was. I said, "Ooh, tough timing."
That's bad timing. Yeah.
Yeah. So much going on that weekend. I guess we can dive into the shows themselves. So the first show Scott went to.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I got the set list pulled up. Should I try to let's see if I can share the set list.
It was the first show that was the only one of the four where they played one of the new albums in its entirety. And again, they did Crescent again. They did the first album, which they've probably done more than any of the other ones. I want to wager. And so they just came out. The first set just started with Hear My Dear, and went through that cycle of songs. And the thing that I noticed with that set was the drummers. I mean, Tyler and Isaac were just really doing stuff with the songs, especially the new songs, that you started to see where these things were taking on the shape of what they're going to be like on stage, moving forward and growing, and that growth really seemed to be based on what the drummers were doing and kind of pushing Derek or pushing Gabe in certain directions. And I noticed that early on, especially like on Fall In, and it came up later in Gravity, where they were just doing this really cool stuff. And of course, Passaquan kind of landing in the middle of that first set. That's a big moment that kind of happens in a odd place in the show. And they came out of that pretty interestingly with Susan doing Just Won't Burn, which is really always has a great reception in Boston, because it really brings people back to the beginning of the Susan Tedeschi Band, where people were rooting for her from the get-go around Boston when she was doing that stuff. So yeah, it was and it was a show that I thought really took off to the next level. Kind of at the end of the second set, they did a great Soul Sweet song. They had this big graphic of Kofi, and people really just went nuts on that.
That was new. That graphic was.
I hadn't seen that graphic before, and it was really nice. And
that was super cool.
People really responded to that, and it was very emotional. And they did Gilded Splinters, which I thought has been a really big song for them this year. One of those songs that's been in the repertoire for a while, but this year, it just, every time I heard it, either at Guilford or the Beacon or something, it just seemed like they really were throwing themselves into this song in a way that they hadn't before.
The Guilford version was.
Yep. That was the first one I saw this. Right. That was the first one I think I had seen with the full band. And I'm like, oh my God, like, it's a song you've heard so many times, but it just sounded like new energy. Right. And but then when they went into Bell Bottom Blues was fine, but then once they got into Why Does Love Gotta Be So Bad?
Sad
bad. Thank you.
You always say bad, but you must be thinking of a different song or something.
Freudian slip, right?
Oh boy,
they just jammed, and Elizabeth had this great solo, and Derek was playing off of her, and um, that, and the energy level just took off. And Let Me Get By was super, and Gravity, and Yes We Will. So it was just a fine start to the run. Especially the way they ended that concert. Like, it was like, whoa, like people walked out of that place like feeling really, really, really high.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, what an awesome set list. Damn, I appreciate all this music so much for sure. Oh, and I wanted to thank Bob Hundert Mark for recording these shows and being a generous taper with his efforts and his time and his labor and posting all that stuff, because I definitely appreciate that and have listened to most of the recordings that have come out over the weekend. I still have a little bit more to finish up from the final show, but all awesome and pretty damn high quality recording. So that is definitely appreciated. And back to what you were saying about the drummers on Fall In on this version, do they kind of like, they've been like kind of like starting that song more with like a drum beat. It's almost like a marching type beat. And then I think some of the instruments come in, versus on the album, I think you kind of hear the keyboard or Gabe playing sort of first. So they've been kind of, I guess, in many ways, I guess, setting or at least in that way, setting the tone for some of these songs on whether they play a Bound for Glory or a Fallen. Like they start off some of the songs.
No, they were very. I mean, the two of them were just really just fabulous. All four. The three shows I saw, they were fabulous. And I'll let Matt take over for the next night. But I think different things catch you at different shows. Like if you start to see the band enough, you start to notice like, oh, like the horns really were kind of had the vibe tonight, or the singers had the vibe tonight. And I thought that the drummers that night one were like, it's like you said, like, oh yeah, Derek and Susan, you guys are great, but do you mind stepping aside in the middle? I want to see what those guys are doing behind you, And they just seem to really be super excited about just doing their thing, and they sounded fabulous together.
It's interesting how our ears can kind of listen to everything at once to some degree, but we can only really focus our eyes when we're at a show or even watching a wider shot, like on part of the stage. So it's kind of like you're going from little section to section. I have a feeling that you guys kind of like watch the show in a similar manner. I guess everyone does. Just you're kind of slow panning around because there's always so much to see and so much going on. When they go into Passaquan and people notice that it's Passaquan, and when they recognize it's Passaquan, does that yield a round of applause or cheers or excitement? Because I feel like just listening and being at shows, whenever Passaquan begins, people are already just like getting excited and just like it's like they're buckling up for a ride. I feel like is the vibe.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know that you're entering the Derek zone at that point. And it's a mutual friend of ours came up to me during the intermission. Janet came up during the intermission, and she reported, that Passaquan was like 18 minutes and 35 seconds, and she timed it. And it's funny because and then I look at the recordings and I'm like, oh yeah, these are like 18, 20-minute long, and like it doesn't feel like you're sort of listening to a song for 20 minutes. Like they really
it does not.
They just bring you into this like space where and I do think, Matt, I don't know, what do you think? I mean, I think as this song has grown, the transitions have become much more seamless. The
Yes,
Derek to
sure.
Gabe to drums to back to Derek, and I think when they first started playing it, it seemed very okay. Here's this part. Here's this part. Here's this part. Whereas now, I think there's a lot more fluidity to it. And I don't know if you feel the same way about it.
I agree. I 100% feel that. Yeah. What about you, Matt?
I think so too. And I think, when we were talking back in the summer and we were talking about, the Guilford one, which was great, fantastically good, you still sort of kind of felt like they were themselves feeling their way through it. And to me, that's even more impressive that they're feeling their way through it. It seems obvious to, people like us who have seen a million times, and, we kind of can see through these sorts of things, but feeling their way through it, but also just delivering every single time. And, there's ones that you like more than others, but it's just the subtle head nods and these little things that they do, and it's really impressive to see. And there's so many things to appreciate about what they're doing. These just very, very subtle nuances that are just, to me, I find so interesting and so cool. So
Yeah.
What Derek does on Gravity, especially with that outro solo on the album itself, and well, I think they played it at Red Rocks and a few other live record a bunch of times at this point. Obviously, they played it, but like it's like otherworldly. Some of the sounds that are coming out of that guitar, like those squeals and those high pitched notes. I don't know whether that dude is adding extra frets to the guitar on the end or what, but just to think about where that song is going to go live. I know they like to sort of change up who gets the solos and the outros and the intros at various points, but I don't know if Gravity they can ever actually not have Derek doing those high pitched. They're so signature, I think, to that song. I think at this point, or at least right now, where I don't know if we can come in and be like, let's have a horn solo at the end. Maybe they can. I don't know, but it seems like that's a place.
I think that song's wide open. I mean, I think Gabe really crafted such a versatile pop song. I mean, it's got this. It's a pop song, but when you listen to the solos that Gabe and Derek, I think, do on that, it's that's his introduction of his material. His kind of given them this whole new, I think, arena of like how they can mess around with their improvisations. It's he's not really in that heavy blues world or R&B world, but has a real sort of pop sensibility that lends itself to what I mean, he's jamming on it too. It's not like he's just kind of playing like the real melodic stuff. I mean, he gets pretty weird on some of his solos, like not necessarily in a Kofi weird, but I don't think anyone will ever get Kofi weird, but he's finding some really cool organ tones and electric piano tones that that they stretch that song out now, I think, in a really kind of cool way without losing its core sort of pop appeal.
For sure. I want to move on to the next show in a minute, but yeah, along those lines, just thinking about the Let Me Get By There instead too, which they haven't really been playing as much lately. They didn't play Let Me Get By, I feel like, too much in this year 2022, but I feel like that is such a Kofi song. It's hard to not hear that organ riff or the opening riff and not think of Kofi. Even that riff itself, even though it's a melody, it's the main riff of the song, it still is kind of it's weird sounding. I don't know the exact music theory, necessarily to explain it, but it's definitely a little bit of a spacey, strange riff, but catchy, of course. And I think Gabe does the song does it justice for sure, and then some. And the song, it does make me think of it as like almost like a tribute to Kofi. There's certain songs that definitely make you think of Kofi, perhaps more than others, and Let Me Get By is certainly one of those. And of course, anything where there was flute, like an Idle Wind or something, even if they don't have flute or something, in the song when they do it now, it just makes you think of Kofi for sure. But yeah, I love that one. Certainly. Where did my sidebar go? I was going to move on to the next.
Can I jump back to one of the points that you made earlier, Adam?
Go for it.
Was the notion of kind of panning and seeing who's doing what on the stage. And I think that if you've seen them a bunch of times, you definitely do that. I thought that was super insightful, and it's something I definitely do. See who's kind of moving in a certain way, or you have someone like Mark who's like just smiling like 24/7.
Yeah, he is always smiling, and then they really do balance each other out, because Derek is obviously more the stoic type, and
yes, but it's funny. So two things I want to hit on super quick, and we can go to Wednesday. One was, I said to the folks who I was with yesterday, when you see Derek either kind of just start making, faces at Sue, or just like looking out at the crowd and smiling and shaking his head and that sort of stuff. Like the stoic description is, 99% spot on, other than like those kind of few and far between things when he gets really worked up. And like, I know that a couple of, on the Bobby Bland songs that Sue was doing, he gets really fired up. So that's really cool to see. But yeah, you're always looking and seeing, like what the singers are doing, what the horn players are doing. They're always like giving each other daps and that sort of stuff. And, it's just, back to your theme of family and everything, watching everyone succeed, being happy for each other. And, you can watch the drummers sort of looking at each other and smiling and laughing, and I'm going to try this, and then you're going to try that. And, kind of the back and forth is just super cool.
Do you think it relates to, like, just a basic level of comfort and trust now at this point, where you got these 12 parts, but there's a certain intuitive. I think Derek is maybe.
Well, you know what?
Maybe he's more relaxed and can smile.
Yeah.
I was gonna say. I think although he's not smiling every 2 seconds like Marcus per se, I think there are more smiles from Derek than really ever, and just more than 2 years ago, more than 4 years ago, more than 10 years ago. Just in terms of his like stage presence, looking at, he was a little bit even more stoic younger, and maybe, smiling and being a little bit more demonstrative here and there on stage is just a sign that the band is just getting that much more comfortable with each other. Not that they were ever uncomfortable, but obviously they've gone through some lineup turnover and some personal loss. So that may not be as much of a reason to be smiling on stage in the past, but they seem like they're in like, I keep coming back to almost like a golden age of the band in some way. Even no disrespect to Tim and Kofi, who were otherworldly musicians and virtuosos, really, but like something about this band and this group and this lineup as a whole just makes me feel like we're really in a golden era, a golden age, like of like TTB. Like, I don't know, there's a certain stability, at least from the outside looking in as a fan.
So two things. I think one, that comfort, they push each other. They all push each other for sure. As far as a golden era, I mean, I think they just continue to grow and evolve and improve. So, it just, again, we talk about, we try not to be like too fanboy, fangirl, whatever, and be objective, but they just really just kind of keep getting better and doing new things and doing different things. And,
they make it impossible for us not to fanboy. And that's really what I created this whole podcast for, really, is just to express how we feel about the band. And I almost feel like improvement is almost an insult, to be honest with you, in some twisted way, like, because improvement implies you were not as skillful or as good at something in the past, but they were always like, I love diving back into 2011 TTB to be, recordings and the bootlegs and all this stuff, and just hearing them. They used, like, they haven't done Stand Back too much over the years, but they did it kind of early on, I noticed, with some of their shows, and it sounded like straight on fire, like, just amazing, with just Susan doing it versus I'm sure we'll talk about with Gabe doing some of the vocal on that. Just, yeah, it's amazing that they do improve, for lack of a better word. Evolve is really, and grow, I think, are stronger words, but improve is an accurate one too. It just sounds like almost like it's not.
I know it seems silly, because when you're just at this like high, super high level, and then they get better and they get better, right? Like, you think of the, you think of athletes, professional athletes, and you think they can't reach the top of their game, and they just go another level. And I feel like that's what they're doing, like, year after year after year. And some, even if it's in a very small incremental way, or it's a large way, or whatever, it's just it's just super fun being a fan and watching what they do and grow.
I think they never really based the band on sort of really conventional ideas about a 2-guitar band, or and obviously they have the comparisons to the Mad Dogs Band and the Almonds and all their other kind of assorted history.
Those two bands combined, and then
But they never,
something else beyond that.
I think they just never really fell into the trap of trying to outright replicate any of that stuff. But using those influences in ways, but never getting away from, like, say, the songwriting in an individualistic way or the arranging in an individualistic way. That I think that's what keeps the band from, every time you go see them, there's just another element of like, I've seen a bunch of these songs before, but not like that. You know what I mean? So there's always that element of surprise and thrill, and I think you just kind of get caught up in the the creativity of it all, right? It's they're sort of making their it's that I guess it's the creativity and the vulnerability of creativity that keeps it very attractive.
Surprises. There's always surprises. There's always new things happening. I'm going to read the set list, or at least the songs from set one from night two, because I forgot there are some audio listeners that can't see the screen, so I didn't quite go through all the songs top to bottom for the first show. But anyhow, Playing With My Emotions, Ain't That Something, Emily, and Keep On Growing, Done Somebody Wrong, La-Di-Da, Whiskey Legs, that was set one. You guys correct me if there's any changes. And set two, Last Night Out in the Rain, Outside Woman Blues, Part of Me, Where My Friends, Midnight in Harlem, Learn How to Love, Angel, Into Sugary, How Blue Can You Get, I Want More, and then Something Scratched Out, and then Space Captain was set two. So with that, I'll let Matt, I guess, jump in and kind of talk about set one, maybe things that jump out at you. We don't have to go through every single song. Kind of do what Scott did, I guess, and just jump around and see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, I'll do my best with it. Anyhow, it's like a song we've heard many times. It's always a very welcome song for first song of the night. After seeing part one on the previous night, I think I texted Scott and I said they're definitely doing part two.
I'm at the Hot Tuna show and I'm getting these messages. They're going into two. They're going into two.
Yeah, so they went with the first two, and you know what? The way that they play with, Playing With My Emotions at the end with the drum, just like that steady drum, part, and Derek does one thing and someone does another thing, and it really works. They're stretching it out, a little bit, but not too much. And then they went to Ain't That Something. I said, definitely happening. And then all of a sudden they go to Emmeline, which was still fantastic, of course. Keep On Growing is always super fun. You have that initial solo, right? Then they come back, builds, comes down. It's just, it's semi-formulaic, but it just works every single time. It's so good. Done Somebody Wrong was sort of a semi-random cover. Again, really good. I think Kebby was the only horn player on that. He kind of mimics that punch that I think that on the keys with Gabe. And Whiskey Legs was actually honestly a song that I wasn't the biggest fan of for a while, and then
either were they never really played it live.
Yeah, exactly. And then they started playing with it, and they started experimenting with it and sort of doing different things, and that was a really, really great version. And I know there are a lot of people who love that song, and I think that those people would really like to hear that version. So we said Bob put it on archive. I would highly recommend anyone who is a fan of that song to check that version out. It was really, really good, very cool first set ender for sure.
Yeah, good stuff. It's funny how you talk about like, oh, we're all trying to predict what they're going to play. Are they going to play this whole first crescent, and they're going to play the next one, and they're going to play 3 songs from this? And it does kind of take me a second. I do find myself like, is that from the third album? Wait, but that's from the fourth one or the third one? And I feel not badly, but like I'm supposed to like know this information off the top of my head. But then when you hear Susan, I think it was in one of the European shows on the recording, I did catch her say, she's like, I don't know what album this from. I totally forgot. made a joke about how she can't even remember or doesn't.
Well, they're all
remember
from Eye on the Moon, right? So
right.
Exactly. That's
just
the album.
consider it one, and we'll all be
Yeah.
good. But yeah, that's what I was saying. I was with a friend at the show on Wednesday. I was like, oh, this is going to be all 2. Then it went 4. Then it went over here. Then it went there. We'll talk about the next set, but.
Yeah, a lot of these songs, or a few of them, have like almost like a haunting sort of quality to them, which I like. And that's what I've talked about this a million times, why I love TTB, because you really do experience kind of all the emotions at a show, and even some unexpected ones like humor or silliness, even through the band's interactions or some of the moments on stage that might be improvised. But just like just anyhow has this hypnotic quality and playing with my emotions. I really like those haunting harmony vocals at the outro to that. Really just
That's a good one.
Good stuff. And Emmeline, like by the midpoint of Emmeline and by the end, and of course with the outro again, it's like these haunting, harmony vocals, really taking advantage of the vocal section there, adding so much atmosphere to those songs.
I think Mike really excelled on the stuff that that he contributed to I Am the Moon. And, I think we always count on him to kind of deliver the songs that are going to be, more quirky or more offbeat.
Right, but they're still catchy. They're quirky. They're weird.
Brilliant.
They're
strange.
But they're still like beautiful and catchy and melodic, and you want to listen to them over and over again, just as much as any other TTB song.
Yeah, and he finds different ways to do that every time. And I thought the stuff he contributed now it's just Emmeline's probably one of my favorites on the whole project. It's just a beautiful song. Yeah.
It sounds like almost like one of those like kind of like Stonesy country, some of their country Keith Richardsy kind of like vibe to it a little bit. I feel like he's got a little bit of that quality in him. Like I can kind of like see.
Oh yeah, well, he used to. Last year he was doing Dear Doctor. He was
right. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
You knew that was rattling around in your head for some reason.
Yeah, I'm making all these connections. I love La Di Da. I love Keep On Growing. I've been kind of fiddling around with them on guitar and singing them in my own style, kind of here and there lately, more so. Like I start off my day before I, start work or whatever. I always feel like I need to play a song, play to a guitar to a backing track, listen to some music, do something, because I know like the rest of the day I'm not going to be able to do that. So I kind of got to get it out of the way. But I thank Susan and the band especially for La Di Da. What a catchy, fun Irish barroom song, and she loves to tell the story of the song and how it's for her son going off to college, and that's what inspired it. Like she's a great stage presence and great band leader, and in that sense, like really working the crowd. Derek's the musical director, and she's the what do you call it? The MC, the host. She's really the host for the evening and working the crowd in a lot of ways and keeping the train moving along and hitting all the things that she needs to do in terms of introducing the band and the songs and telling the story and having some personality. And she really does interact with the audience. If you yell something from the crowd and she hears it, there's a good chance that she'll respond, as long as you're not like saying some obnoxious thing. Like it's like I guess that's part of what you get with a band like this. That's not necessarily filling up stadiums. You can yell something from the crowd. If we were seeing that the Rolling Stones or U2 in a football stadium, you cannot yell "thank you" from the crowd, and Bono will not say "you're welcome" back. Oh man, should we get into set 2?
Yeah.
Let's run through
Let's do it. I'll try to keep the train moving along here.
Yeah, the Last Night in the Rain was the one song I was chasing, and so I was a little bummed that I missed it on this one. So
I love it. I almost want to say it's one of my favorites of I Am the Moon, but again, that's like, for me, everything is my favorite. The current song is my favorite thing, but that one especially.
I will say for that song is that if you ask my kids or my wife, I sing to myself all the time throughout the house. And that's a song that I don't even realize that I really, really enjoy. And I find myself singing singing it like out loud. Like I'll get out of bed and put on my slippers and go do whatever. And it's like singing that song. And I'm just like, why is this song just stuck in my head for whatever reason? I'll have, 3, 4, 5 songs that I would tell to a fellow fan. I like this song and I like this song and I like this song, but I would not say that specific song. But I find myself just continually singing sort of different parts to it, the refrain obviously, but like different sort of little parts to it. So, that was super fun. I'm sorry, Scott got that one.
That's all right. I gotta go back. That's right. I gotta go back.
But part of me too, when they first did it, and if you go and you kind of like say you put on Spotify and you put Motown classics or whatever, right? Like they'll feed you songs and you'll hear a couple songs that have sort of a very similar guitar to it as part of me. And what they do, and I think Scott was speaking to this earlier, where they would just take it and just go in a complete direction that you would not expect whatsoever. Like, let's turn this into like a crazy like horn, showcase, and that's really for me when it went from like, oh, cool, this is a cool song, from like, yes, this is like a good take, at this show.
Yeah, I was gonna say the first time I ever heard a sax solo outro on Part of Me, I was totally blown away by what I heard, and it took me into totally new places as a fan, and emotionally, really like hearing that, because Part of Me does kind of have a Sam and Dave Soul Man kind of vibe to it, and it's super cool and it's upbeat and makes you feel good. I'm jumping all over the place, but thinking back to how you were talking about Last Night in the Rain being in your head and singing it. Totally. I'm totally the same way. I totally been hearing that song in my head, the melody to it and the vocal part as well. Like, I think it's the vocal is really catchy and has some catchy parts to it. It's a really great groove that hooks you in, and the song really just, it makes you feel good. I think that's really what it is more than anything. Most people are, when you're humming or you're singing a song, I feel like you're usually singing something that's maybe more upbeat. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's something to that.
Well, you know what I think is sort of cool is that Falcon wrote that song, right?
Yeah, he had a big hand in that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you talk about like Mike having these sort of quirky lyrics, like that song has some pretty quirky stuff, just sort of like, things that sort of go together but not go together.
Yeah.
It's just a really super. Yeah, it's a cool arrangement. It's a cool song. Like the lyrics are,
little mysterious,
very mysterious and fun. So, there's, and then you think about it as a first song to that 4, right?
Yep.
And it's just like a perfect lead off. So I think I had said at least, Scott, and maybe you missed this, I don't know. If you think of the album sort of flipped, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you start with that as the first song, as opposed to Here My Dear, and then do 4 all the way through, then 3 all the way through, and then 2 all the way through. It really actually works pretty awesome, and it really works very cool.
You're just determined to end on Passaquan. That's your
theory.
Well,
that's, I mean, come on, like it's almost like too easy, right? So but just going back through this here, Where Are My Friends? It starts out like sort of sleepy, and then it ends with, it kind of like builds up to this crescendo, which is like it's just something they do very, very well, and they don't lean on it like too heavy throughout their catalog. But when they do it, they just, knock it out of the park. Learn How to Love was a semi more understated version, but still really super good. For me, that's one of Derek's best riffs that he's made as TTB. Just that opening riff to Learn How to Love. And then, probably whoever's listening to this has heard Angel, Sugary, and How Blue, many, many times. And, they're always super good. You never don't want to hear either of those. I was sort of surprised they went to the Sugary, but it was certainly not a disappointment whatsoever, because they've done it sort of a couple different versions of that. I really like that. I really like the Crosby, Stills, Nash, Helpless. But yeah, and then I Want More is great, and they go in a bunch of different directions with that. And then Space Captain's sort of one of their like, keystone, like end of the show encore, songs that, everyone loves every single time they hear it.
Yeah. It's interesting too with Part of Me, we got another party last night, and
Yep.
we were talking a little bit earlier too about the songs that have kind of fell off the set list and the songs that we were talking about like what didn't show up in Boston in terms of like the classics, and when you look at the songs that they held on to, Part of Me being one of them, and what they're doing with the songs, like they're really just making them really explosive. And obviously, I didn't see that one, but the one I saw the other night, and Alicia was fantastic, the horns were fantastic. The whole thing just becomes like just so huge, and as great as this is what we're talking about earlier. You might have seen Part of Me when Saunders used to sing the falsetto part or whatever.
Right. I was thinking that the other night when Alicia was doing it.
Oh, yeah. And
Yep.
It's just like they just bring it to a whole, like, you're like, oh, okay, this is why they hang on to this one, because they had more to do with it. You know what I mean? And and they repeated it twice. So I think there's definitely a method to the madness behind some of this stuff.
They definitely know what they do better, and they want to dig into what they do very well. Why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah, but what at least presents possibilities to still mess around with. Even Midnight, I think, I know that that song will always be sort of a really special song for the band, but it's not something that like, oh, here comes Midnight, I'm going to roll my eyes and go to the bathroom. It's still like beautiful, and they find things to do in that song. This is that creative vulnerability that I was talking about earlier. I think that there's, they bring you into that space where they're, like they're not walking through this, man. Like they're not walking through it, and they're making you pay attention to what's happening, and and there's a big payoff. There's a big emotional payoff if you hang in there with them.
Yeah, there's no mailing it in on Midnight in Harlem, and I feel like to some of like the more hardcore fans like ourselves, we probably wouldn't be upset if they didn't play Midnight in Harlem and instead pulled out something more obscure, maybe that they haven't played in a while. But once they dig into it, and I think they keep themselves fresh with the intros, how they set that up, and with the guitar solo, obviously at the end with Derek, what he can do there. He can obviously do some new things. But once they're in the song and Susan's singing and everyone is just so engaged, it's impossible to not exist in that moment.
Yeah, no, it's to their credit that they they know that there's people walking in there who are going to see them once a year, and they love that song, and they're going to play that song. And there's also going to be a bunch of people who've seen the song 1,000 times, and they're going to make it work for both of us, right? And it was cool. The first night I was there, I sat next to a guy who bought a ticket that day. He was in Boston for business, and he ended up having to spend the night, and so he was looking at things to do. Patterson Hood was at City Winery. Tedeschi Trucks was at the Orpheum. He got lucky on Ticketmaster and bought this great seat at the last minute. First time seeing the band. He had heard some stuff about Tedeschi Trucks, and like the guy had like a religious experience. Like by the end of set 2, he was just like, holy shit, like what was that? I'm like, yeah, this is what they do. And he's like, I'm coming back, and it was funny because I met him the first night, and then on the Friday night I met younger guys who they're at like their second or third show, and they kind of sheepishly said that they had come into the band through Fish. I'm like, oh, that's fine. Whatever gets you here, gets you here. And we all come here through different ways. And it was just great to see young fans just being so enthusiastic for this music. I think, there's this perception that the TTV crowd is all less kind of older crusties who've been around with like, the Almonds and the Dead and blah, blah, blah. But there were quite a few younger people there and getting into the music and learn and just they heard about the live vibe and they were learning about it, and they were learning about it enthusiastically, and it was a lot of fun, like just watching them get into the show.
I think there's a couple of things I guess you can give credit for that. Dads, maybe there's some dads out there that are passing it down, and not all the kids
I was
hate
sitting there, a guy who had a 16-year-old, he had a 16-year-old son.
Right.
Absolutely.
So we'll give dads some credit, but I think, and this is a credit to TTB's talent level, but I think some of the younger fans, I bet a decent percentage of them actually are musicians, guitar players, singers, like people who are sort of more engaged in the scene. It's like, I don't know about the average 15, 16-year-old is even going to discover TTB. But along those lines, it's like, if you go to a show, whether you're a hardcore music fan of this type of music, it's like you're going to be hooked. You're going to be hooked to some degree at the end. Let's move on to the next show. I'm going to read the set list here from night 3 of 4, December 2nd. Don't Let Me Slide, Laugh About It, When Will I Begin, Stand Back. Actually, it's what it says on this set list, but it's Stand Back, of course. Life is Crazy Somehow. Take Me As I Am, Idlewind to close out the first set. Set 2, Suzanne, So Long, Savior, Signs, Gin House Blues, Shame, It's So Heavy. Any Day I Pity the Fool, and then Bound for Glory in the end of the second set. You guys were both at these last two, so I'm just gonna put my feet up here, and I'll let you guys.
I am convinced that Matt personally wrote this set list for the band. This is every song he's always kind of championed. I think because they played on Friday night, and we had this conversation earlier, and we weren't sure if we were going to dare to say it, but I think we're going to say that. I give the nod to Friday night. Of the 4, typically the last night of the run has been the big champion night, but this is probably my favorite show of the year. I saw 11 shows this year. This is probably my favorite one that I was personally at. The set list was perfect. I thought the way they played was just so dynamic and just so, just chasing each other around on the solos, and everything was it's such a high level. Susan was flawless, I think, all night, and that combination of Somehow, Take Me As I Am, just outstanding. And then Idlewind has always, you're talking earlier about Kofi songs. This is probably the most Kofi song, and I always felt like them doing it, without Kofi. I remember one year, Kebby actually played the flute, I want to say, and they've tried different things with the song, and it's always interesting. But I thought that the version that they did for this year, this Friday, they really found their way into that song in a way that is right for this configuration of the band. And this was another one of those points where I think they had the Kofi image on. They were obviously paying tribute to him through this song. Definitely. And but doing it in a way that was really of this lineup, I thought. So yeah, the first set, there was just I think we were crawling back and forth to each other before it was even over, and yeah, but I don't know, what was your take on all this?
So when I first started seeing them, 10 plus years ago, I had basically one friend who I would kind of go with the shows to. Any show that was around, I would say, hey, you want to go? This is my favorite band. And he was more into kind of like Fish and Grateful Dead and that sort of stuff. Really, really huge Wilco fan, which I really dig them as well too. But we always went, and we always kind of said to each other, you can tell if it was going to be like a good show or a really, really good show by the first 2 or 3 songs. And this, to me, that's what I said with this show, when the way that they did Don't Let Me Slide and Laugh About It, really they just started out just super energetic. Derek was very, very energetic, and then you drop into When Will I Begin, which is, a much slower song and a ballad, and it's just still so good. And the energy is still so high, even though it's a very, slower song. And then it's like, oh, cool. Let's go into this, Allman Brothers song, which is not one we've done a good amount of time, but not a million times, like they've done many of them. And they're just, again, super great energy. Then you get into the mic.
Yeah.
Then you get into the mic vibe, which is always good. I gotta say, even yesterday, some of the things he was doing, he just finds a way, like every single time, to really just put his mark on, the songs. And, you definitely feel like he's sort of subverted time and stage presence to Gabe. And, they're both fantastic. But when he gets in there, he's just so good. He takes chances. He never misses a note. He's just so great. And then you go for Take Me As I Am, and I kind of thought about maybe like 2 minutes into the song. I said, this is a perfect lead into Idle Wind, and they went right. I predicted to kind of everyone around.
What made you think that?
Just like completely the pace of it and the way they were doing it, and it just. For whatever reason in my brain, they were like 2 minutes into it, 3 minutes into it. And I thought about where it was, like what the time was on the clock. And I said, this is going to happen. And it just, it seemed like a perfect fit. And, they know what they're doing. And it was a fantastic version.
Oh my God. They were doing the whole, Mackie jam in there.
Yeah. They had the Mackie Madney jam in there. And it's funny too, because the folks that I was with, it's my wife's cousin and his wife, and she's a pretty big fan, but I didn't know as big of a fan as she is. And she said, oh, they threw that, and I think it was just the Mackie Madney and not the Sahib Terry Bandy, and I'm sure I'm absolutely butchering the pronunciations, but she leans over to me, she goes, yeah, they threw that in, right? And I said, yep. they totally did. It was great.
But you make a good point too. Like the way that they kind of drove the energy like really high, and then brought you to that ballad that didn't sag the show. It kind of made this nice like sort of creative tension as they going into the funky Allman Brothers song, and then Mike's whole theatrical blues, and the set just had so much vitality and movement in it.
It stayed up for the most part, and even when it went down just a touch, it still just maintained that great energy. It was just, you said it, you articulated it much better than I did.
but they, this was the show we were talking about this a little earlier too. Like this night had the fewest of the new songs. And then was it,
just two. Or
three
just Somehow and Take Me As I Am,
and then So Long Savior.
So Long Savior,
and which is funny because they, like, everything I loved about the other shows was really centered on the new songs, but this ended up being my favorite show, just because I think of the overall energy and what they were doing. Are we done with the first set? Because
they're able. I was going to say that they're able to keep us on our toes, even as hardcore fans who are doing almost doing a fairly good job at predicting what's coming. I could see, but like they're able to keep us on our toes with the set list, with their choices, with who gets what solo. It's just amazing, and that's what keeps us going, and that's why people are able to go to 3-4 shows at Boston, going to 5, 6, 7 shows at the Beacon or something like that, because you're going to get so many.
What was interesting about this set is, like, even though they weren't playing the new songs, they were playing songs that you don't hear that often either. So it was a real kind of, it was an opportunity for them to sort of, kind of dip into the rarities bag on this night. And then set 2 was just completely bananas. This set, I thought there was real logic to this set with, we were talking about, the Royals and Biden being in town this night. And a lot of these songs, and even if you look at Laugh About It in the first set, and then, Signs and Shame and It's So Heavy, with all these really powerful, socially conscious messages, and Sue's, her blasting part and I Pity the Fool were all aimed at, this really kind of, admonishment of the powers that be, and sort of, aspirations for a better kind of civic and civil life. I think pouring all those messages into this set, I mean, I don't want to say that the band was doing it based on what was happening, in the headlines, but it happened, right? And
yeah, I think that what they're, not to cut you off, but I think what makes it work is they're able to express themselves, even subtly politically perhaps, but their music really transcends that, and you could be of any political denomination and fall in love and be in love with all these songs and kind of interpret them to your own personal meanings to some degree, I think. And kind of along the lines of what you're saying, just looking how they finished the show with Bound for Glory, despite all the emotional turmoil, so to speak, that's expressed throughout maybe the set list and even in the second set of this night, like Bound for Glory, like the band, really is a symbol of optimism and sort of a hopeful ending to the show. And it got me just thinking more about like it's really important what the band wants you to leave with. What's the final image? What's the final sound, the final feeling? And just thinking about how they finished with Idlewind in the first set, like I kind of like that, because like something that was very closely tied to Kofi before intermission, when everyone's going to go out and talk, everyone kind of like, or some people probably do have Kofi at the forefront of their minds, and I think that maybe was part of it. Plus, Idlewind is obviously a beast of a song that's more than capable of finishing any set, but I think Bound for Glory more than appropriate for this night of songs, and really, for any TTB encore, just because it's a positive message. That's really what the band is. They're all about really positivity, not being unrealistic or not being naive or Pollyannish or something like that, but they are sort of have that sort of resiliency, like all to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can we talk about two things real quick with the?
Oh, of course. Yeah,
set?
you were going to say something before. I'm sorry about that. Were you?
No.
10 minutes ago, you had a thought.
No, you're directing the show. I think that I was probably one of maybe like less than 10 people who, when they opened up with Suzanne, like emphatically like pumped my fist. When they do that first, when Derek does that first, when Derek does that first little, plunk on the strings, which in the Nina Simone version is that's piano,
right? She
does piano, and I don't know if she does the piano or if someone else does the piano, but he does the plunk of the strings on it. And then Shame, I think I texted Scott pretty much like right after, and I was like, what was that Coltrane tag that he did? I couldn't place it. I guess like 2 or 3 different things, and then he placed it, maybe, I don't know, it was 40 minutes later or whatever, and I said, yep, you got it. And it was one that he had done when he was 20 years old or something on his
first record,
on his first solo record. So that's what Coltrane, Paul Chambers, right?
Yeah
So that was a random one, right? And you think of, I've always said, Shame to me is, it's obviously a pretty obvious political message, but it's also at the same time a very open homage to Coltrane, because he's done Afro Blue, he's done Favorite Things, he's done Green Sleeves, he's done, probably even things that I have literally no idea what he's doing, but but he is putting those things in there. So, I always appreciate that. These very, again, sort of subtle nuances that I've kind of talked about before, that, it's like you have all this stuff which is mind blowing on the surface. And then like, if you just start digging a little bit, you can find more, and then you dig a little bit and you find more, and you dig a little bit more and you find more. So it's just really, it's very gratifying.
I mean, like this set, like this was definitely like, like the Drop Acid set, because like, you had the Suzanne So Long Save, you definitely have those kind of holy man images in both songs that play off of each other.
Very religious for sure.
But at the same time, there was a lot of this like chasing muses around. So Long Savior. Susan turned that into Hound Dog Taylor's "Give Me Back My Wig." Like they went to this like hard rollicking blues that
right.
Maybe she had done that back in her barroom days or something. And that's the song where Gabe's on drums and Isaac's on. So it's just like it's like this crazy fun energy.
And she was like giggling while she was doing it, right?
Yeah, I think they kind of surprised themselves. So they
exactly.
They jump into that song. Any Day they jump back into the Allman Brothers, like messing around with Blue Sky. So there was a lot of and then the Coltrane stuff. So a lot of their influences, they were just wearing them on their sleeve and pulling them out and connecting their music to their legacies in these really fun, creative ways. There was that kind of overarching narrative, songs like Signs and Shame. They all, they're kind of
It's So Heavy is pretty egregious.
Yeah, And then, I Pity the Fool that was the big showstopper from last year that they played on the last night that they pulled into this night. Cause I do think it fit into the we know how Sue ends it, right? She kind of turns this, lover's blues into more of a angry citizen of the world blues. And she was, really ranting about it. To us, it seemed, like the nonsense that, people like Kanye are saying. And she was just really on fire. And what I thought was cool about this version too is, Derek's doing a lot of the accompaniment. And he was playing so hard, like with just like that rhythm riff of like that dun dun. And it's like, man, like he's like driving that really hard. And it was like almost like pushing her even harder. Like that song, I was like, this place is just gonna explode, man. Like if this show doesn't end soon, like this place is gonna explode. And it was just dynamite, and I think that all of those factors contributed to like why I just really thought this was my favorite show of the year. There was just like nothing wrong about this.
The way you described that explosion, that's like a real thing, and that's really kind of what we're paying for, and that's what we want to feel and what we want to experience, and to have those feelings, it's what's kind of what makes life great in a lot of ways. Those simple things and capturing that energy and that spirit and that fun. And to go back to So Long Savior, and then talking about how they went into, what is it, the Hound Dog Taylor song, that must have been something that just happened organically, at least in my head is what I'm picturing.
It
like
felt that way when it was happening like in real time.
Right. And that just goes to show like how organically things really do sometimes happen with the band. Like they were probably just playing So Long Savior, and then the drums did something, someone in the band did something, and everybody went along with it and said, oh, why don't we try this live? So I'm guessing that's like how it happened. I don't think Susan was like going to bed one night and she's like, you know what, let's add another part to So Long Savior. I think just Falcon or someone on drums started doing something, and then like they went into
I'm sure there's a backstory that we'll never know, but
we might know.
I'd agree with that for sure.
It sure worked though. I mean, it was a lot. It was, they were very playful the whole night. I thought solos were flying around, things were bopping. It was just a really, the band was just like, they were going for it. And I think that if there was any slip ups or missteps, they weren't noticeable. But I think that this was definitely the show where they were kind of playing without a net. Of the three that I saw, and really just anything I saw of them this year, this felt like the most playful and exploratory of the shows I saw.
Shall we get into the next night, the final night
here? The closer.
Yeah, I got it. I hear the Boston accents coming out. I've got a feeling, playing with my emotions until you remember the letter gravity. I'm the moon, Passaquan, and the river were the first set. And then second set, Here My Dear Fallen Part of Me. Soul Sweet song, Yes We Will. Everybody's got to, what's the second part of that song? It's the Taj Mahal song, Midnight in Harlem, that did it. Sign of the Times, A Storm Whipping Post Fire and Rain, and Show Me.
Everybody's got to change sometime. I think
Everybody got to change sometime, right? The Taj Mahal song with Mike doing the vocal, of course. What do we? Oh, let me go back to the first set. There we go. The Beatles cover starting with.
Yeah, I mean, for me overall, I think the contrast, between night 3 and night 4, this was the band at its most. I think. I don't want to say composed in a negative way, but I mean like where the Friday night felt like they were kind of running around and seeing like what was going to happen. Like this
more
was
playful.
This was like, this is what we can do. You know what I mean? Like we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and we can do it all really well. Like there was just a real precision, full of passion too. But I think the precision was just, exquisite. I mean, they really just made some beautiful, beautiful art.
Yeah. I've got a feeling it's definitely a good end of year song. Just thinking, because at first glance, I'm like, oh, they just haven't played that in a while. It's a nice vibe to set the show. Not even realizing or thinking about that. This is the final show of the year for the band. So I think that's a perfect song. Everybody had a good year, a hard life, a hard time, whatever the lyrics are.
Sure.
Certainly.
I think, Scott, you were right about it's funny because we have just like sort of their entire discography sort of ingrained in our minds that we sometimes forget like what is a rare song and what is not. And I think that you hit it right when you said, you'll see one or two sort of like random bust outs for something. And I think you don't even realize it, but something like Until You Remember as like the third song on that last night is a pretty nice treat to get.
That was really
and then,
nice.
Like I love that song. And then you get like The Letter, which when they first started doing it was super cool. And then after that, they sort of did it like almost every show for a long time.
Yeah.
But then you get it now and you're like, oh wait, I forgot how awesome this is.
Yeah.
And then just, another, I think for the Friday and Saturday shows, like all these songs that they did were just basically like A+ versions of like every single song. And, that's, you say like, oh, that's what we pay for. And it's like, we're almost like spoiled because
we are,
you go and you're like, well, I expect to have just an A++ show. Right. And, there's so many other, bands out there that are so great. And, they just, I just feel like they're just on another level than so many other. And, when you don't get that A+ and you get an A or you get an A-, you're like, oh, it's still really good. But
I don't know if it's ever been an A-. Maybe there's been maybe
not for me, not for a very, very long time, and it just, it just speaks to their, professionalism and just their, how terrific they are at what they do. So
it's almost like we expect, right? Yeah, we expect the quality of the show to be like top notch. That we take that for granted, but what we don't always expect, but we hope for, I think, are surprises, especially as the hardcore fans, where it may be a little bit harder to surprise us with what song, because we kind of know what they've been playing on different legs of tours. But what they can surprise us, whether it's with a new, like I say, a different person doing a different solo, or pulling out and Until You Remember or something like that. Just
we were talking before, like, is it a Derek night, is it a Sue night? I really felt like like the last night was like an everybody night in such a way that, like, like just thinking about Until You Remember, like that horn intro right through the, everyone, like, they really emphasized how important every single member is to this band's success. And I mean, I thought there was such a balance of everyone's time in the spotlight on this last show, that that was a real winning quality to it. And then even just revisiting songs like Gravity, I Am the Moon, Pass the Quan, that that had popped up earlier. You notice things like in the Passaquan, like the way they came into the drum solo was a lot different. It's like, they came in real strong, whereas like The other Passaquan, it was one of those like slow builds drum solos, and like just to kind of throw those things into the fact that like, well, yeah, there's probably a few people who've seen Passaquan like 9 times. Let's mess with it and like let's see if those psychos notice. And yes, we do. Well, thank you. And
I was gonna say that's you.
Yeah, no. Speaking of that, someone posted in one of the fan groups. Some guy like went through like not every single, but a bunch of different like Idlewind versions and like analyze. Was it you, Matt? Maybe it was you. I don't know.
No, I think his name's Rich. I'm again probably gonna mispronounce it. Rich Barnard.
He's been on the podcast. Yeah, one of you guys, maybe Scott. We have to have a Passaquan like library where this you have the Passaquan, the venue, the date, the length of the song, and kind of like some sort of analysis.
I'm sure there's a website already dedicated to that somewhere on the internet. So yeah.
Well, we talk sometimes about like what makes like a good one versus like a better one versus like the best one versus whatever, and it's just like
the drums
they're all just like pretty different from each other. And
that's true.
Like you think of even how good the studio version is for like an instrumental song, and I mean
right,
the
or
way
even
that
the Fireside one from the video is such a good one.
The Fireside one is terrifically good,
but you can always count on that. Like you always count on that riff to bring you back into like the groove of the song. And for me, that chord Derek hits at the end of the drum solo,
it's a light switch.
That's always like boom, like it just works every time. It's
goosebumps. I'm get goosebumps just like thinking about that. Seriously, it's crazy. But yeah, Passaquan, I feel like I can do like a whole episode just like based on that. So maybe I will. But like the drums, I really do associate that song with the drums and what Tyler and Isaac do there. Like I love that just as much as anything I've heard on Mountain Jam versions over the years. And I feel like that's saying something because those are some of my favorite drum duets. Is that what you call it? Is a duet? It's not a solo, obviously. It's dual or duet. And I gravitate more towards that. I think obviously just because it's like you can follow the conversation going back and forth between Isaac and with Falcon, but it has more of a rhythmic quality than obviously a drum solo, which is, I guess, more individual expression. Whereas a drum duet is more of a interaction, communication narrative that you're following back and forth. And I think that in addition to some of the other things, obviously the Derek riff and just what he does on that song is incredible. And
I think
as we talked about,
it's also a song that's, that helps, I think, elevate to Brandon Boone's work. I mean, he's really, I think since the I Am the Moon stuff, this is the first album where all of the new people have been actually part of the creation. And, I don't know how that figures into his head or his role in the band, but I thought he was much more pronounced this year and this run in particular with what he was doing in Passaquan and every song. I mean, he was just such a presence and given space to be more of a presence. I think and he had a lot of good solos and riffs, and especially in the second set with what we'll get to later. But I Passaquan, I think, is he's every bit as vital to that song as anyone on that stage. And, it's, that was another nice factor to this too.
I think they just started giving him a solo or giving bass solo to him on Anyhow. I think that's a bit of a newer thing for the band. And that is just a super cool thing. Anytime the first time I hear a new instrument or a new section of the band doing a solo I hadn't heard on a thing, it's always kind of like jarring in a way, not in a bad way or whatever. It's just like, whoa, what is this? This doesn't sound familiar. And then once you sort of like get into it and let the music do its thing and kind of just like, whatever, it grows on you and it just sounds super cool. And it's just, again, so fun to dive down these different roads. And it's interesting. Last week I was talking to Larry Williams, who plays drums, and we were talking about the ways people listen to music, and he hears more on the lower end is what he described. He's obviously, we're hearing everything, but he's more focused on the drums as a drummer and on the bass and probably the rhythm section. And it makes me think that I do kind of take Brandon and bass playing and even the drummers often for granted, just as a guitar player myself, and Derek and obviously Susan too, being the focal point of the band. I can sometimes take the bass for granted. Do you guys kind of see yourselves or as kind of like how you listen to music? Are you guys more like hearing the guitars, obviously hearing everything, but are you able to kind of hear everything? And
I think for me, when you find stuff that you really like a lot, is you find out what you like about it, and then you start digging into the different layers of what else is going
with
on.
each passing listen, you notice new things. There's
right,
that too.
Exactly, and I think that's what's great about a band that does a million live shows, is that you can find out some of the different things that's going on. And with a band that has like 11, and I always hate when people use this term because I think it's very overused, but I think in this case it's definitely true, is world class. You have 11 world class musicians that are all kind of marching to the same beat
12
here.
But yeah.
and when you can I mean, Derek and Susan, like, yes, they're great, obviously, right? And then like when Scott talked about some of the different Elizabeth parts and the different Ephraim parts and Kebby and some of the stuff Mark does on for example here Fire and Rain, and it's just what makes it so great. And there's so many different all-star musicians going here, and when you have a favorite album, right? Like a favorite album, you're never going to have one favorite song, right? Say there's 12 songs in the album, at one part in your life, song number 2 is your favorite, and then a different part of your life, song number 6 is your favorite, and a different part of your life, song number 10 is your favorite, and so on and so forth. So I think that, is pretty apropos here.
Yep.
Certainly. Shall we talk the second set of the final night? I know I've taken up enough here, a lot of your guys' time already, for sure.
Yeah, no, I again,
getting late on the East Coast as well.
I think they, it was all about sort of the execution, and they knew this was their last batch of songs for the year, and so I'm sure there was a very intentional. This is what we want to play. We love playing, and and they sold every single song. I mean, I think Yes We Will. That is such a great song that it's again, it's got that socially conscious message that's not hitting you over the head. It's B.B. King homage, very blatant B.B. King homage. And
I was going to ask what older blues influences do you specifically hear? Because I do hear definitely Buddy Guy.
She said flat out, this is a song about saving the planet and B.B. King. Here, right? Like, I mean, like just to take like
the opening note from Derek is a B.B. King note.
Oh, the whole thing is, and it's and it's cool because I mean, you can read it as a Save the Planet song. You can read it as like a traditional blues, like I'm having a bad time song. It's great, and I thought Soul Sweet Song is funny. I saw it once at the Beacon. I saw the version the other night. And that's one of those songs where it seems kind of simple on the surface, but I think there's a way that they want to be careful not to screw it up, and so I don't want to say they play it tentatively, but they're not like really. You could tell like not just like going at it at 110%. They're not there yet, and I thought that this version was probably the strongest version, but like there was like a lot of confidence and gusto, and the way they kind of swung through the song, you could tell that they really were feeling good about it, I thought. And
it's not a song that they improvise on. That really gives a lot of room for improvisation, right? But it's a song that you can see them putting more emotion, or hear them putting more emotion and more intent into it, if that makes sense.
Like Make a Joyful Noise, right? It's one of those songs where it seems like very straightforward, very simple, but it also seems like it's easy to mess up. And I think they feel the same way about this. Like if it doesn't click the right way, this kind of beautiful song won't really kind of live the way it's supposed to live. And so I've always thought there was a certain sort of like, moving through it a little bit gingerly than they do most songs. But I thought this version was really, really nice. And
yeah, I was gonna say, you know what it is? I think on a lot of these other songs, you have more solos and more room for improv and different sections where it almost requires this sort of focus where it's like, what's coming next here? Like, here comes my solo, here comes your solo. What arrangement are we doing here? Whereas this song has almost a little bit more of a poppy type vibe. Obviously, it's a great tribute to Kofi, but I think there's maybe a tendency or a temptation, probably not for this band, but I could see like almost just kind of like floating through the song in a sense without like really existing in every lyric and every moment. And the band doesn't do that. Like Susan obviously puts her heart and soul into every single lyric, especially this song being a tribute to Kofi. But yeah, that's a special song, and not surprising at all that it made its way to the final show of the night in the second set.
Yeah,
certainly. I think you talked about sort of like a little bit of a poppy vibe to it, right? And I think they played it on Jimmy Kimmel or whatever.
Yeah, put on TV, yeah.
And a lot of people who are into kind of the music that we enjoy, right? They would almost take that as like not a compliment, but in this situation for me, it sort of is, right? And I think also too, you can think about the notion of, and I think they're really good at this, is not overcomplicating things when you don't need to, and just playing a song, right? Like we always want like the giant, Derek solo and him going off in, this direction or that direction and all these different things. And there's really something to be said for just like playing a straight ahead version. And I don't think this was a super straight ahead version of the song, but just playing a straight ahead version of a song and just doing it very well and just doing it very soulfully and very sweetly.
Yeah.
Back to the Yes We Will, the BB King homage, it reminds me of from the Regal record, the Help the Poor a little bit.
Yeah.
That when she said that, and to be honest, admittedly, I never really put that together, but when she said that the other night, I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And then I thought of that song, and I thought that really sort of, went together pretty well. So,
yeah. See, when I first listened to it, I totally picked up on the BB thing, but was less tuned into the environmental side of the message. I mean, I read it more as allegory, like about
that's how I took it as well too.
And but it does make sense as okay, like they're really talking about saving the planet. This isn't
right.
Yeah.
And that's sort of that's just like an overarching theme, whether socially or environmentally or what have you, through that's a very strong through point with vast majority of their lyrics probably.
Yep. I agree. I thought the Midnight in Harlem again with the big intro, the Swamp Raga intro was beautiful and just an excellent version. That did it. She made hometown reference to Johnny D's, a club that she used to. The part about where her no good lover's drinking was this time was at Johnny D's, where she was a launching pad for her, and a lot of people I think responded to that lyric.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that was that song's always a lot of fun, and rather than ending on the big blues number, they did the Storm whipping post combo, which Matt and I were laughing. This is the jaded fan. So
the elitist.
Yeah. I was like, we don't want to hear a whipping post, and then at the end of it, we're like, oh my god.
It's haunting. It's haunting what she does on those vocals
it was really. I mean, Derek broke
show-stopping.
Derek broke a string. Gabe's playing the solo to cover Derek's broken string.
Right.
And then Brandon does a giant solo before they even get into the Susan. I mean, it was a really. I guess the lesson learned every time is like just shut up, Scott, and go listen, right? Like, don't worry about and it's there's always a payoff. And I thought, man, like that was some powerful music at the end of that night, you know.
I think 3 times this year alone in 2022, I saw Gabe personally cover Derek changing a string on 3 different shows, you know, and he does it very ably, and, you know, it's really cool when he does it. You said it all. I don't have too much to add other than the obvious, you know, Sign of the Times is really great. And, you know, to me, the thing that I love about that song, and I didn't even know until I, you know, started on Google or whatever it was, that when they did it the first time at the Beacon, that it was a Harry Styles song. And, you know, of course, I don't live under a rock. I know Harry Styles and how popular he is and everything. But the thing that I find so cool about what they do with that song is the chorus he does in a very falsetto way, and Sue does it in a way more sort of robust and very like just strong and powerful, and really just sort of flips it on its head. The message remains the same, no doubt, but you know, again, you know, they took, you know, one of the probably 5 biggest pop stars in the world, and they took that song and made it their own, which is really, you know, what can you say about that?
Well, again, like that's, you know, like that really reminds me of like a tradition that you saw more in the 60s, right? Where, you know, cool bands would rescue great songs from pop blandness and make them, well, it was like we were talking about Fire and Rain, like, you know, there's
yeah, good segue.
You know, there's the soul version, and there's the James Taylor version, and this is clearly echoing the soul version. And, you know, Mark was otherworldly, I thought, on his performance on that. And you know, that it is cool that they can take these songs that you know, you wouldn't expect to be, you know, something they'd be interested in, and really just make it their own. And they got, I guess you'd say they got big ears, right? They can hear quality no matter where it comes from, no matter what world it comes from, you know. It doesn't matter if it's Harry Styles or, you know, Joni Mitchell. A good song's a good song, and they recognize that.
It's funny because sometimes I'll hear other artists doing songs. This maybe more so it's artists from the 60s and 70s, but I'll hear like the Tedeschi Trucks version of that in my head a little bit, or be like, oh, I can hear Susan doing this song, or Mike, or like we got the TTB has the horn section to make this work, or certain songs like, and sometimes like vice versa, I'll hear a Tedeschi Trucks song, I'll be like, the Allman Brothers could have done Shame or something like that. Like, how cool would it be to hear Greg doing the vocals on Shame? I feel like, you know, they would have, you know, Greg would appreciate, and Dwayne would appreciate so much of what Tedeschi Trucks Band is. And I forget who said it, but like someone was saying if Dwayne was still around, like Tedeschi Trucks Band would probably be something that like he would explore, or like in many ways maybe was or is the ideal version of eventually a band that he would be a part of, something like that, if the Allman Brothers weren't a thing. But yeah, this is just a fantastic set, and for me personally, I feel like they always balance the shows in terms of giving everyone their shine. I've never left a single show. Obviously, you know, maybe other people feel there might be slight imbalances here and there, but for me personally, I feel like I never noticed that. And I feel like I get just the right amount of everyone and everything. And I appreciate the care and time and effort that the band puts into the set lists. I know that they go back to what did we play in Boston last year at this time, you know, let's make sure that we do play the same or don't play the same, or this
or
that.
Not even beyond what's on the paper. You know, we were talking earlier today, Matt and I were about the encores, you know, it's the end, you know, they're exhausted. They've been playing for 2 hours. It's the last show. And then like the last song, Show Me, is just like this showpiece where everybody is just like
kitchen sink
flying. And we're talking like, you know, the part of the song when they kind of go through the horn rounds and the horn.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They like specifically like when it was Kebby's, the drummers went into a totally different beat, and then they went back to the regular beat for the other two horns, and then they kept changing how many measures that. So I mean, like everyone, what looks like pandemonium is really just very keyed in on the most like exacting level.
Yes,
to pull it off.
It's crazy. It's crazy how they just make the most intense thing just look so easy, and you know that it's not easy. It's definitively, obviously not easy. They just make it look so great. Derek is gesturing to one person and then to another person, and there's not even like a split second drop in quality of any way whatsoever, and they just keep going and going and going, and it just made it the last two. The two encore songs were very interesting and sort of fun choices for me, right? Like you get so accustomed to like Little Help from My Friends, something like that, right? And then you go into that where everyone may have an expectation, but then it's like you have one of these things where you didn't expect it, but then you enjoy it even more than what you thought what you were expecting to hear, right? So I always love the encore songs that end with like that high energy like that. They just really it's sort of maybe not the norm, and maybe that's naive of me, but it's always really welcomed, I would say.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite aspects of this run and the stuff leading up to it all, with I think the arrival of I Am the Moon and all this new material, and I think it's just been such a vital reset for this band to just kind of not start fresh, but move away from the expectations, the way songs are paired, or what's a first set song, what's a second set song, or what's going to be in an encore. I mean, I just love that. These were 4 shows, evening with Tedeschi Trucks Band. There was like no one else on stage but them. It was just a real testament to get excited about what's to come. Like this band has a lot left to say and a lot left to do, and it's just really exciting to watch it all happen.
I just keep thinking about the Show Me and thinking about Derek and the horns and thinking about like he's conducting out there. He's a conductor in his own way within his own band. And he's conducting a party. I feel like it's really a party out there. It's like this very tight, highly skilled craftsmanship, musicianship, high level of all those things. But it's for us, the fans, and the feelings that the music brings, and Show Me and the horns and the whole vibe and the rousing conclusion to the year, really. Like, the dude, I'm sure, and did a great job directing the party out there, essentially conducting the party with the horns. And
these guys, they I don't think they left anything on stage, really. It was just a fabulous show and a fabulous 4 show. Well, the 3 I saw, and sounds like the one Matt saw, I think we can say the 4 of them were all you could hope for.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. 100 mark. I appreciate the recordings. I'm gonna be. I mean, these 4 shows, 2 sets each show. This is gonna sustain this. I mean, we got new stuff coming up in January. The band hits the road again, I think, in Florida to start the year. But like for the next several weeks, with these 4 shows, wow, we have a ton of music to sustain me, and like I keep saying, whatever I'm listening to in the present, whatever song, whatever version of song, that's my favorite one. That's the best one. That's the quintessential version. That's the right Derek solo. That's what he did there was the best thing ever. Susan's been the more powerful than ever on this version, the current thing. Whatever the current version is. But do you guys have anything more for the talk about as far as the final show, or anything else you want to cover? I know I've taken up a ton of your time. I'll boot you guys out of here in a minute and do my outro, but then we could chat more for a few minutes if you want to kind of say goodbye. But if you guys got to go, I get that too. Anything else we should cover or mention you want to say about the shows? I'll kind of give you.
This has been fun. I don't know. Geez, Matt and I have been probably talking online. It was funny. I think after the Friday show, we were. I felt like I was in this like a. What's that insurance company where like the wife's like, who are you talking to? It's like, oh, Joe from Allstate. Like I'm texting at like 1 a.m. She's like, who are you texting? Like, never mind. It's like,
we could do this all day.
We're talking about Coltrane.
Yeah, we could do this all day. I could, and just know that whenever I message you guys about Tedeschi Trucks, I am probably listening to the show. Even if I don't say, I'm probably listening to the band in that very moment. But yeah, like it's been such a joy and so much fun for me just to connect with other nutcases like myself out there.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. You know, all the people that I've met, a lot of really wonderful people. You know, it's just really a pleasure, you know, to find folks who are, you know, as enthusiastic about something as yourself. It just really, you know, brings a lot of joy. And
that's what I meant when I said nutcase, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Say a little more tactfully.
Yeah, what he said. But on that note, is there anything that you guys want to plug or promote or mention or direct anybody to? I'll post the article, of course, with the episode description and all that, the Scott's recap. But on that note, I appreciate it, guys. I'm sure we'll talk more soon.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
Bye-bye.
See you next year.
Later. See you next year. So there you go. Episode 97, recapping TTB in Boston with Scott McLennan and Matthew Gervais. That was a lot of fun. Again, thank you, Bob Hundert, Mark, for recording the shows. I think there might be someone else who recorded shows as well, but thank you to all the tapers for sure. Please check out Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram. That's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, on Spotify, all these ways you're either listening or watching. I'll try to get the audio version out of this show and within the next few days or so, maybe sooner. Get that out there for you guys. I am on Instagram and Twitter at Adam Choit. TedeschiTrucksBand.com is their official site. Join the Swamp family. Buy tickets, buy merch, support the band any way you can. I'm kind of a fan of them. I kind of like them. So I appreciate you guys supporting them too. My other podcast, People We Love Podcast.com. For that one, the editedmovie.com, the short film that I wrote and directed. Check that out as well. I think that's all I got for today. I'm going to try to get a couple of more episodes out before the end of the year, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But on that note, again, thank you to Matt, and thank you to Scott for the time. It's been super fun. It's been a fun year. It's been a journey, and I'm looking forward to just 2023 and beyond. But on that note, later.